I held the jar in both hands for several minutes, unable to decide what to do next. It felt heavier than it should have, not because of the money inside, but because of the questions it carried. Every folded bill represented a choice my wife had made without telling me. Every coin seemed to whisper about a sacrifice I had never noticed. I wanted to believe there was a simple explanation, yet my imagination kept wandering into darker places. Had she been planning to leave? Was she hiding from some financial burden she had been too afraid to share? Or had I somehow failed to notice a part of her life that had existed right beside me for years? The house suddenly felt strangely quiet. The ticking clock in the hallway echoed louder than ever, and the afternoon sunlight pouring through the bedroom window made tiny particles of dust float gently through the air. It was the same room where we had laughed over midnight conversations, celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes, and comforted each other through countless disappointments. Yet in that moment it felt unfamiliar, as though the room itself had been keeping a secret. I carefully examined the remaining envelopes before opening another one. Inside were dozens of grocery receipts, each with small handwritten calculations in the margins. Maren had circled tiny amounts she had managed to save by choosing store brands instead of expensive ones. Some receipts showed she had put back items she probably wanted for herself. There were receipts from our anniversaries, holidays, and birthdays. Looking at those faded pieces of paper, I finally realized why every celebration had always been so simple. I remembered one Christmas in particular. I had surprised her with a beautiful wool coat that she had admired while we were shopping downtown. She smiled warmly when she opened the gift. But a week later I noticed she was still wearing her old patched coat. When I asked why, she simply told me she wanted to keep the new one looking nice. Months later, I discovered the new coat still hanging in the closet with its tags attached. Eventually, she quietly returned it without ever telling me. At the time, I thought she simply wasn't interested in expensive clothes. Now, I understood that she had chosen our future over a moment of happiness for herself. The memories kept returning one after another. I remembered how she always packed my lunch before work, even when we could barely afford groceries. Somehow the lunchbox always contained my favorite sandwich, while hers often consisted of leftovers that were hardly enough for a full meal. She never complained. If I asked whether she had eaten enough, she would simply smile and insist she wasn't very hungry. Only now did I realize she had been protecting me from worries I never even knew existed. Another memory struck me with painful clarity. 5 years earlier, I had become seriously ill with pneumonia. I was confined to bed for nearly 3 weeks, unable to work or even walk across the room without becoming exhausted. Maren never left my side. She took extra sewing jobs late into the night while caring for me during the day. I thought she somehow managed everything because she was simply stronger than I was. The truth was far different. She had quietly carried burdens that should have been shared. As I sat there surrounded by those envelopes, guilt settled over me like a heavy blanket. I had spent years believing I was the one protecting our family because I earned the paycheck. In reality, Maren had been protecting both of us in ways I had never bothered to notice. Outside, I heard children laughing as they rode bicycles down our street. The sound reminded me how quickly life passes. We spend so much time chasing bigger houses, newer cars, and higher salaries that we often overlook the quiet people standing beside us, making invisible sacrifices every single day. My eyes wandered toward our wedding photograph resting on the dresser. We looked so young in that picture. Our smiles were full of dreams we couldn't possibly understand yet. Back then, I believed love was measured by promises spoken during ceremonies, romantic surprises, and grand celebrations. The older I became, the more I realized love often looked completely different. Sometimes love looked like patched sweaters. Sometimes it looked like homemade soup after a long day. Sometimes it looked like pretending not to want something because someone else needed it more. Those thoughts made my chest tighten. I wished I could go back and thank Maren for every little thing I had taken for granted. I wished I had noticed sooner. Just then I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. Panic rushed through me. For a brief moment I considered putting everything back exactly as I had found it. Part of me wanted to pretend I had never discovered the secret at all, but another part knew that whatever truth remained hidden inside, the last envelope would change both of our lives forever. I gently unfolded the final letter, took a slow breath, and began